Pokémon Champions. 186 Pokemon, all fully evolved. Wow. I mean, there's just so many options. I mean, look at the Slurpuff right there. He's having such a good time. I mean, I don't know why Simisage is here, but sure. And I mean, you gotta have Pikachu. Glalie? I mean, Glalie's gonna go boom. That's so fun. Oh my god, Manectric's here? That's like my favorite Pokemon. Yeah, I'm not gonna say his name. God, it must be good. There must be such a really healthy, diverse meta going on here. If we're being honest, the meta in Pokemon Champions isn't actually that bad, but I still suffer from this crippling disease called idiopathism, otherwise known as I don't get enjoyment out of playing the meta, so I intentionally nerf myself by playing weird shit. It just feels so much better to beat someone with your wacky Mega Houndoom or Mega Sharpedo BS, and then when it's all over, you get to look at them and you just say,
I'm better! I am better!
And if you lose, let's be honest, there was nothing you could do about it. They're just cringe for playing the meta. It is what it is. Simple as that. Anyway, take it from me, someone who's been playing competitive Pokemon for the better part of 10 years. These are some fun teams that are off meta, and they're bound to get you some good wins and have some good fun, more importantly, in Pokemon Champions. So let's just jump right into it. We're going in order of best to worst teams on this list, so we're going to start off with this Mega Charizard X team. The key staples of this team are Dragapult and Charizard, so feel free to make some changes to the team if you feel. The existing team has a lot of synergies and covers each other really well, but of course things can be switched around, but Charizard and Dragapult I heavily suggest stay, and I will explain why. We'll start by looking at Charizard. When Charizard Megas, it becomes a really strong physical attacker, boosting its attack to 130. This initially seems strictly worse to its other Mega form, which gets 159 special attack in comparison, and the Drought ability. Charizard X, though, has a couple things going for it that this team uses to its advantage to make it better than its Y version. The first and main things to consider are Dragon Dance and Tough Claws. Dragon Dance is of course a move that boosts the user's attack and speed by one stage. Mega Charizard Y does not have any boosting move in comparison that it can use. Additionally, Tough Claws boosts all contact moves power by 30%. This means that oftentimes when Charizard gets a Dragon Dance up, it's going to outspeed and one-shot nearly anything with powerful stab, Flare Blitzes, and Dragon Claws. This leads me into the next point that makes Charizard X really strong in this meta, which is its Fire and Dragon typing. This typing lets it have incredible coverage that its other Mega normally doesn't have, and importantly, it lets it tank several hits that most players won't expect. The most common answer to Charizard in the meta is Garchomp or other Pokemon that like to outspeed it and spam Rock Slide, because that lets it hit the normally fire-flying Mega Charizard Y for 4x damage. This isn't as much of a worry for Charizard X because it switches out its flying type for Dragon. Charizard X also gets to tank a few more hits than expected due to it gaining 33 extra points in its defense stat when it Megas. In this meta, we are primarily dealing with really physical skewed threats, so it matters a lot to build toward that, and its partner in crime, Dragapult, really helps it also deal with those physical threats even more. Dragapult acts like a speedy support Pokemon on this team. Its main objective is to cripple physical threats with Will-O-Wisp and later set up Reflect to help Charizard tank even more. We run Colder Berry on Dragapult because the primary threat to it is going to be King Gambit. Other things that are going to threaten it, like Garchomp, are going to typically target what they expect to be the Mega Charizard Y, so you don't really have to worry about running Habanberry too often. The rest of the team adds depth and other ways to play when Charizard doesn't look so good. Rhyperior and Orthworm are play on the very common Garchomp Orthworm combos that have been seeing a lot of success in tournament. Orthworm is a really great support Pokemon that can pass substitutes with Shed Tail to other Pokemon like Charizard. And it also gets to be immune to earthquakes from Rhyperior and actually heals off them instead. Hydreigon is here because it's a really good Choice Scarf Pokemon that's able to use powerful Draco Meteors and Dark Pulses to one-shot a lot of big threats like opposing Dragapult, Basculegion, and Mega Frostlass. It also has the added bonus of Levitate, which lets it be immune to Rhyperior's Earthquakes. And then finally, we have Mega Manectric, who plugs a lot of holes for tough matchups with this team, particularly into Rain and really fast Tailwind setters like Aerodactyl. Mega Manectric is fantastic at dealing with Rain because it uses the Rain against the Rain teams by using really powerful Thunders, setting supportive light screens, and taking normally very dangerous Electro shots from Archaludon and redirecting them to itself and giving itself a special attack boost with Lightning Rod. Going back to the fast Tailwind setter point that I was making with Aerodactyl, speed control is something that this team has to manage very carefully because it has very little of its own. Manectric and Hydreigon are a good double lead into a Tailwinding Aerodactyl, so that because they are both able to outspeed it and one-shot it before it can get that Tailwind up. Additionally, we're seeing a lot of Trick Room right now, so that lets our Rhyperior actually take advantage of that because very little is going to outspeed Rhyperior in Trick Room, and Rhyperior is going to be throwing off massive damage, and oftentimes the opponent is going to be too scared of letting the Rhyperior go crazy to Trick Room, or if they do, then your Rhyperior does get to go crazy. So it's kind of a win-win. However, if the opponent does get some form of speed control up that we can't use to our advantage or can't prevent, then this team does still have a lot of survivability and really can just wait out those turns very often, thanks to the really good physical damage crippling by Dragapult and its burns, Manectric and its intimidates, and just overall really good bulk. The clip that I've been playing in the background showed one of the most common leads where we have Dragapult Charizard into Garchomp Kingambit, or Garchomp Sneasler, or something similar to that. These double physical attacker leads just kind of highlight what it is this team counters about the meta. It's all about crippling part of the opponent's team and using that time to set yourself up with something to sweep and win. This next team is a little harder to pull off, but it can still be consistent if you play it right and understand all of its quirks. It has several different modes and just simply uses some different fun Pokemon. To start off, we've got one of my favorite Megas, Mega Houndoom. He's a bit of an interesting one because he hits really hard and has a great Fire Dark offensive typing, but his speed tier makes him a bit awkward at 115, but we'll address that in a second. Mega Houndoom has a crazy 140 special attack stat and the ability Solar Power. Combining Houndoom with Nasty Plot and Heat Wave and Dark Pulse lets it fire off crazy amounts of damage that can hit basically anything for neutral or super effective damage, likely getting one-hit KOs. In certain matchups, like in the Mega Charizard Y, this can be compounded even further by Houndoom using its pre-Mega Flash Fire ability to boost its fire attacks even more. However, Houndoom does have a couple drawbacks. As I said earlier, Mega Houndoom has a decent speed tier at 115, but the meta has 120 base speed Sneaslers and Choice Scarf Garchomps running around everywhere, so we need to combine our Mega Houndoom with Corviknight. Corviknight is able to wall a lot of Pokemon that would typically take out Mega Houndoom, and in doing so, it's normally able to set up a Tailwind and remove the issue of Mega Doom's speed tier. Next up, there's Torkoal. Torkoal serves a relatively simple role here. It's here to set up Sun for Mega Houndoom to boost its Heat Waves and get Solar Power going, but it also functions well on its own in Trick Room, and that's something we'll get to in a minute. Moving on to secondary carries, we'll start with the simpler of the two, Tyrantrum. With a Choice Scarf and powerful Stab, Rock, and Dragon moves, he's able to hit threats like Garchomp and Mega Charizard Y for big damage. And also, with relatively few bulky Steel and Grass types in the meta, Head Smash is able to hit a lot for big damage. Clawitzer is the pick that I'm sure people are most confused about on this team. First, His special attack stat is a lot larger than most people give him credit for, and Mega Launcher is actually a pretty good ability. This lets him have extremely powerful coverage in the form of effectively base 120 power Dark Pulses, base 90 power Stab Water Pulses, and base 120 power Aura Spheres. Beyond that, his base 59 speed makes him function very well in Trick Room, and he can actually also counter opposing Trick Room teams. But in most matchups, he doesn't need the Trick Room to have value. He can still function without it. You do have to be a little careful with Clawitzer on this Sun team because of the obvious little bit of anti-synergy between the Water type and Sun, but I really only bring Torkoal and Clawitzer together when I'm hard committing to Trick Room, and usually I lead Clawitzer with Farigiraf in that scenario because he takes on a lot of the common threats that are going to be threatening to Farigiraf with his coverage and damage. And finally, we have the queen of support for this team, Farigiraf herself. Farigiraf ends up being really critical for a lot of reasons here. First off, there's Armor Tail, which of course prevents Fake Out and other priority moves. Denying this is already really valuable, but then when you consider the fact that Mega Doom normally wants to go for Nasty Plot, that can leave it at relatively low HP quite often, so protecting it from priority moves becomes really important. Farigiraf is of course also able to offer Trick Room support and denial. Trick Room denial via Imprison makes sense to most people, but why Trick Room is good on this team is also a little deceiving. Of course, we have Pokemon like Torkoal and Clawitzer that can use it really well thanks to their low speed. You look at the rest of my team with the Choice Scarf, Tyrantrum, and Mega Houndoom, and you might think that that might nerf them a little bit, and you're not completely wrong, but for one, the Trick Room core on this team is already really strong by default, just the Torkoal, Clawitzer, Farigiraf themselves, and then for two, this team without Farigiraf struggles in the Tailwind a lot. This team has no consistent way of denying Tailwind and struggles to compete with it, so this team needed to get creative to find a way to deal with it. So you have to consider what Pokemon and team archetypes are going to be running Tailwind. The Pokemon that are going to set up Tailwind are going to be Whimsicott, Aerodactyl, and Talonflame as your primary Tailwind setters, and they're all really fast Pokemon, faster than anything on my team, and they're often going to be run next to a Pokemon that is also somewhat fast already and is going to hit really hard. Farigiraf's Trick Room can counter these teams because we Trick Room, and then in effect we become slower than them because they're probably already pretty fast and our speed tiers are okay but not great, and if they set up Tailwind then it works against them and for us. So this lets Mega Houndoom become faster than these Pokemon and just lets it do whatever it wants to them. And then admittedly, it is a little bit of a guessing game trying to predict whether they'll Tailwind or not, and sometimes you can end up putting yourself in a little bit of a rough scenario depending on if you do or don't get the predict right, but a lot of the time, even if you do get the predict wrong, Trick Room can be really strong anyway because, again, we have that powerful Torkoal, Clawitzer, Trick Room core. This team's a fun one. There's pretty much only one common Pokemon on it in the form of Farigiraf. Catches a lot of people by surprise, and again, it's just some really cool, really niche, fun Pokemon to use like Mega Houndoom. So just get out there, try it. There's so many different ways to play it. There's got to be at least one that tickles your fancy. These next two teams that I'm going to talk about are less niche than the first two, but they've still got some funky tech and they're still consistent enough that I wanted to show them off. And also, they're the two teams I climbed to Masters with. But to keep this video from being crazy long, I'm going to keep the next two explanations shorter, relatively short, just a couple minutes, and the final two honorable mentions will be super short. So if you have any questions, feel free to ask me in the comments. I'm not going to talk about every synergy, everything. If I did that for every team, I'd be going over every team for 30 minutes. So trust me, if you have questions, I'd be more than happy to answer them in the comments. Just let me know. Now, for this team, we've got our Mega Glimmora team. If this is actually the first team that I made in Pokémon Champions, so it's a little special to me. And as I mentioned, it's one of the two I used to climb the Master at the beginning of the season. This team isn't super complicated, but every Pokemon is super fun to use. First off, we've got Mega Glimmora. Mega Glimmora is a super hard-hitting Mega that gets 150 special attack and the adaptability ability upon Mega Evolving. I saw this thing when Pokémon Champions released, and I thought it had to be busted. I give this thing a stab Sludge Wave to hit multiple targets, stab Power Gem to deal big damage, and Earth Power for coverage against Pokemon like King Gambit. It's able to OHKO Pokemon like Mega Floette, Mega Char Y, Sneasler, and can do a lot of damage to basically anything else. People run Glimmora with Sludge Bomb normally instead of Sludge Wave because they don't want their partner to be at risk of being damaged, but that is why we run our Mega Glimmora next to a Noivern. Noivern is our Tailwind setter, which is a bit necessary because Glimmora only reaches base 101 speed. The reason we put Noivern specifically next to Glimmora is primarily it's the telepathy ability, which makes it unable to be damaged by teammates. Noivern is an uncommon Tailwind setter. Noivern's very fast. It's not quite as fast as Aerodactyl, so you might be thinking, is telepathy the only reason we use it here? And here to tell you, no. Noivern being a dragon type is actually really big for Glimmora because the one thing that Glimmora has a lot of trouble dealing with is Garchomp. Garchomp is 1 point faster than Glimmora, and Glimmora can't one-shot Garchomp while Garchomp can OHKO Glimmora in return. But this is where Noivern comes into play. Noivern is able to Draco Meteor the Garchomp and one-shot it for Glimmora. As I said before, Garchomp being the only Pokemon that Glimmora can't really take on alone makes it so the Draco is just so valuable. And then beyond that, it can just do big damage with Hurricanes and the Rain teams and just Draco in general and so on. Other important Pokemon on this team are Farigiraf, which we talked about for the last team, except this time Farigiraf's only really here to deny priority moves and Trick Room with Imprison. And then there's Volcarona. Volcarona is a really cool support Pokemon on this team because it's got the Flame Body ability, Citrus Berry, and Rage Powder, so it's able to redirect a lot of the physical attacks that Glimmora wouldn't really like to take itself, and it can sometimes get burns. If the situation arises, it doesn't necessarily have to go for that supportive role. It can go for Quiver Dance sweeps late game, with Noivern giving it Sun Boost for Heat Wave. Aegislash is next up here. Aegislash is mostly a wall breaker, but the steel typing is really nice next to Mega Glimmora because, again, it becomes immune to Sludge Waves. And then Wide Guard is also really nice because blocking spread moves is just something that's really big for this meta. Blocking Heat Waves, blocking Rock Slides. There's a lot of good things to block in this meta. And then finally, there's Mega Gardevoir. Gardevoir is just sort of an alternative to Mega Glimmora when needed based on the matchup. Telepathy can be nice to avoid Sludge Waves when we're not Mega, but most of the time Gardevoir and Glimmora are not going to be brought together. Again, it's just kind of here for when the Mega Glimmora doesn't look like it has a very good matchup. Oftentimes, when that's the case, the Mega Gardevoir does have a good matchup. They kind of oppose each other in that way. A bit of a less off-meta one, less niche, but still really fun. Now for the last team that I'm going to explain really somewhat thoroughly, but we do of course still have two honorable mentions coming up after this. We have Mega Venusaur. The funny thing about this team is that when I first made it and used it in the first week of the game being out, it was off meta, but now as time has gone on, it's become less and less off meta, particularly in the last week or so up to this video's posting, which is kind of funny actually that I kind of identified this thing so early on and it took people a while to catch on and find it as well. Also features picks like Incineroar and Garchomp, and those, I'm not going to explain those because those are already in the meta. You should have a pretty good idea of what their purpose is, what they want to do. As you may have heard, since everyone's talking about Mega Venusaur recently, it's good because it's a very tanky pick, and its thick fat ability and good bulk makes it so it's able to live a lot of hits from what's in the meta right now. There's not a lot of strong Psychic or Flying type Pokemon running around, which are the two things that Mega Venusaur really has to care about. And then, of course, Stab Giga Drains and Stab Sludge Bombs are going to do big damage. They're going to hit a lot of things really hard. And then I prefer to run Synthesis for some extra survivability. Other people I've seen run Leech Seed. I prefer Synthesis just because when the opponent goes for Protects, I'm able to protect that a lot of the time and Synthesis, and then that puts me in a really good spot. Primarina is just kind of another carry on this team that can help Pokemon like Garchomp be the fastest on the field by running Icy Wind. It can also fire off strong Moonblasts and Liquid Voice boosted Hyper Voices just to deal big damage. Nothing super complicated about Primarina. The nice part about it is that it also completes the Fire Water Grass core between Venusaur itself and Incineroar. And on top of that, the secondary typing of Fairy matches well with Venusaur's Poison and Incineroar's Dark typings. And then next we've got Sableye. Sableye is a fun one because he's been increasing in usage as well. The reason Sableye is good is because he has the Prankster ability. He can easily burn a lot of the physical attackers that are strong in the meta. He can encore support Pokemon and set up sweepers or Pokemon going for Protect. He has Fake Out, which is always going to be good, and he just has Nightshade just to do some damage because his attack is relatively low. The only other thing you could maybe run is Foul Play. And then finally we have Clefable, who's a strong redirect support Pokemon that's able to manage speed with Icy Wind or do shockingly high amounts of damage with Stab Moonblasts. This is definitely the least off-meta team of all the teams in this video, but it's just a classic for me, and it's just such a banger that I just had to point it out, especially since it's gaining traction. Finally, for the honorable mentions, we have first a Paldean Tauros team that gets to use Frostlass's Frost Breath move to critical hit our Paldean Tauros and boost its attack to the max with Anger Point. The team also features a funny after you mouse hold gimmick with Mamoswine to make sure that Mamoswine is able to move relatively soon and get surprise knockouts. This is a team that's not really super consistent since it's super gimmicky, but it can be really fun to pull off if you get it right. And then the other honorable mention has to go to my Mega Sharpedo team. This team is not very good, if I'm being honest, but it's just really funny. Mega Sharpedo can OHKO a lot more than you might think thanks to Strong Jaw Stab Crunches, and then also just Stab Flip Turns with Speed Boost. It's going to outspeed a lot. And then the support on this team is just really funny. Upper Hand Raichu it's got to be one of the funniest things for me, just denying Fake Out. But yeah, that is all the teams that I've made so far that I feel deserve to be shown in this video. Didn't want to make it too long, so we're going to limit it to just those 6. I've just seen people complaining about the Pokemon Champions meta and lack of Pokemon recently. You know, I just have a passion for really making off-meta things and just doing this kind of thing. So I just wanted to show that there is in fact more to be found out there, more to be used. It doesn't all have to be Sneaslers and Incineroars and Mega Floettes. You can find some funky things and you can make them work, trust me.